Yo, what's up, guys? Leafs lose again, 3-1 to the Montreal Canadiens, guys. It just continues, obviously, to get worse for the Maple Leafs, guys. 8 straight losses for them, guys. 8 winless, 0-6-2 record. Now, obviously, we all know as Maple Leaf fans, this is for the best, of course. Leafs losing another game, continuously trying to get a top 5 spot, obviously, for the draft this year, obviously, because we have an inept general manager, of course. But just another performance night where you say to yourself, how much worse can this hockey team get at times, especially after that first period tonight? Luckily enough, Joe Wall was absolutely spectacular tonight for the Maple Leafs. Or this game would have been an absolute blowout tonight. Joe Wall making 30 saves on 32 shots. Obviously, the Habs scored an empty net goal there. But Joe Wall was absolutely phenomenal in this game tonight, guys. Only gave up 2 goals in the first period. The Habs absolutely dominated the Leafs in that first period, like outshooting the Maple Leafs 18-5. Leafs had their worst shots in a period of the season this year, guys, in that first period against Montreal. Montreal was just outpacing the Leafs. They were a lot faster than the Leafs, got to their positions a lot quicker than the Maple Leafs could. They were all over the Leafs in that first period. The Leafs defensively were horrendous, as we saw on that first goal, Kapanen in front of the net there. He's able to get alone on the side of the net. He's able to get in front there, get the puck, and able to beat Joe Wall with nobody there to stop him there to make it 1 for the Habs. It's just another example of how bad the Leafs are defensively in their own end. Leaving a guy wide open there at the side of the net. They're able to get in front there and pop the shot in there to make it 1-0. It was just like, my God, man. How many times do we got to look at this hockey team and say to ourselves, how can you be this bad defensively? Honestly, how can you be? It's honestly pathetic, And then the second goal, there's nothing that the Leafs can really do. It's just another example of how bad the Leaf season has been and how unlucky they've been this year. Of course, the puck bouncing off the glass there, falling right in front of Philip Deneau because Joe Wall thought the puck was going to come around the other side of the ice there, and it falls right in front on the opposite side there, and Deneau pots the rebound there to make it 2-0 for the Habs. It was like, honestly, guys, I just said to myself, just please end this bloody season. End our misery, for God's sakes, because it was literally embarrassing, to say the least. Watching this Montreal Canadiens team, a massive rival of the Maple Leafs for years and years and years, to see them doing what they're doing to us, it makes me sick to my stomach, to be honest with you. You know what I mean, guys? It honestly does. I hate the Leafs losing games in general. But to lose to the Habs like this, the way they were playing, it was absolutely pathetic. Now, I loved what Jake McCabe did at the end of the first round after Easton Cowan got leveled there by Gallagher. He fought him to defend his player. That his teammate there. That's great to see. Some leadership there by Jake McCabe to obviously defend the player there. Even though we don't see too much leadership from this hockey team as of late, of course. But nice to see Jake McCabe defend Cowan there. I thought Cowan played a pretty decent game today, especially in the second period. I thought he was one of the Maple Leafs' best players today. The Leafs did look a little bit shaky the first couple minutes of the second, but then after they got their feet moving, were able to draw a couple penalties, had a couple power plays, of course. Couldn't do anything there, obviously, because we know how this Maple Leafs power play operates. Had a little bit of a spark at the beginning when they hired Steve Sullivan, but it's obviously regressed to the power play that we all know, and just being very frustrating to watch, of course, But like I said, I thought Cowan played well. Berube obviously juggled the lines in this game, of course. Cowan was on the third line, then he went on a line with Matthews and Nylander. We saw Cowan connect with Nylander on a beautiful give and go to cut the deficit down to 2-1 after Nylander intercepts the puck at the blue line there, makes a nice pass to Easton, gets in front of the net there. Really good play there by Cowan and Nylander to cut it down to 2-1. I did feel the Leafs had a lot more ozone time in the second period, outshot Montreal 11-6, we're the way better team, hit a couple posts. McCabe and Ekman-Larsson hit post on back-to-back plays, so there was some encouraging signs there for the Maple Leafs, guys. But listen, as we know, this Maple Leafs team here, they're very inconsistent. They have spurts of where they're on playing some good hockey, and then they get right back to what they are this season, of course, and that's being a bad defensive hockey team, not generating any opportunities, of course, and letting the other team have an opportunity to win the game. To only have 2 shots in the third period. Montreal only had 9. The Leafs did push a little bit at the end of the game there with the empty net there, of course, but as we know, this Maple Leafs team, guys, they're just really battling it right now. William Nylander said it today, even though they're going out there and trying, it's really difficult, and it's just not good enough. I think we can all agree on that, but to lose to the Habs the way they did tonight, Obviously, it's not the best for the way they lost, but it's obviously best for the entire outcome of the future of this hockey team. Obviously, hopefully to God getting a top 5 pick in this upcoming draft, of course, guys, but just another bad loss for the Leafs that you could see the difference in speed between the Habs and Leafs and how slow the Leafs are, and that's due to Craig Berube, of course, and Brad Treliving obviously looking for a more heavier team, and it ended up biting them in the ass this year, of course. Especially Brad Treliving, doing the deals that he made, obviously at the deadline last year, of course, and obviously that coming back to bite the Leafs and everything else that he has done this season, of course. But you also had the rookie, Bo Gruel playing tonight. I thought he played okay tonight, playing 14 minutes tonight. I thought he was pretty decent in the third period, especially, had some opportunities, one really good play where he had his line, pushing in the O-zone there, had a couple chances there. I thought he wasn't bad tonight. He's obviously the leading scorer for the Toronto Marlies. He's got 50 points in 54 games, so he obviously deserves this opportunity. Has played in the NHL before, has one goal. Obviously, was an empty net goal, I'm pretty sure, against St. Louis when Craig Berube was coaching them, ironically enough. So, I saw some good minutes from him. Quinlan only played 8 minutes. We'd like to see that kid get a little bit more ice time, but obviously he's playing on the fourth line, so I don't expect a lot of ice time from him. Callan played okay tonight, 18 minutes tonight. I thought he was one of the more positive players for the Maple Leafs tonight. Now, obviously, the elephant in the room, of course, is Austin Matthews. It's his 12th straight game without a bloody goal, and it's obviously worrying. Obviously, the team's playing like shit. He's not playing well right now. He hasn't scored, obviously, like I mentioned, the amount of games he has. He's just doesn't look like the same player, that he has, obviously, the last 8 years, obviously. He was obviously playing a little bit better hockey before the Olympic break, but now he seems to have regressed again to what he was at the beginning of the season and obviously what we've seen a little bit of last year. So, very concerning, of course. Obviously, he's going to be getting criticized a little bit, and it's obviously justified, of course. He hasn't been good enough. Sure, he's playing good defensive hockey, and this could obviously be due to Craig Berube and what he wants him to do on the ice, and obviously limiting him offensively, of course. So that could be another reason he obviously could be injured. So there's a lot of things you could be looking at, guys, with the Maple Leafs as well. The Maple Leafs have been outshot 46 times, or 46 or 47 times, I'm pretty sure. It's the most in the NHL. It's pretty bad, to say the least, that the Maple Leafs continuously get outshot game in and game out. That's also due to Craig Berube, I feel, as well, to the style of play that he implements. Of course, it doesn't work, obviously. I think as well, like I've said in the past videos, that Craig Berube does need to leave at the end of the season. There's obviously no point in firing him now. Just continue to keep him as coach. These guys have clearly tuned him out, but right now it's about tanking, and the Leafs are doing their job right now and losing hockey games right now. That is their job right now. That is their goal. That should be, obviously, they're going to be trying. But the teams that they're playing up against coming up, they're playoff teams, like Anaheim and Buffalo, their two next opponents. Those teams are obviously competing for a playoff spot. Buffalo's now at the top of the Atlantic, 4 points clear of Tampa Bay. So, Buffalo ain't going to stop. They're going to continue to push, and we all know how Buffalo and their fans love to beat the Leafs, especially in Buffalo. So now that the Leafs are at the bottom of the Atlantic, of course, Buffalo's at the top. They're going to really want to hammer the Leafs on Saturday. So I don't expect anything else on Saturday night except for another loss. Same thing with Anaheim. Joel Quenneville has done a hell of a job with the Ducks. I expect another loss there. The man that I wanted to take over the Maple Leafs before Craig Berube was Joel Quenneville. Look what he's done in Anaheim. Done a hell of a job, even though some questionable things of his past. What a job that man has done in Anaheim, guys. But once again, another lackluster performance tonight by the Leafs, except for the second period, only getting 2 shots in the bloody third, only having 5 in the first. It's just not good enough, guys. But as of right now, I think we could all agree, as long as the Leafs continue to lose, and their schedule, it just does not look good. You're playing a lot of playoff teams, a lot of teams competing for playoff spots right now. I expect more losses to come, but I will say this. If there was one game that I would have loved the Leafs to win, and if it would have been their only win for the rest of the regular season, it would have been tonight, obviously, against the Habs to screw up their playoff position. Of course, obviously they're trying to compete for a playoff spot. Would have been great to play spoiler for them, obviously. That would have been spectacular, to really hurt them a little bit, taking away some points. But at the end of the day, I think we can all agree the most important thing is the Leafs lose more games than they win till the rest of the regular season is over. Of course, obviously, guys, we got to try to focus on a top 5 spot, bottom of the league. Of course, St. Louis, they were winning 4-0, then they blew the lead. So they're obviously one team you got to look at. Rangers beat Calgary tonight 4-0, so that's great as well. The Leafs just got to continue to lose games, keep playing the young kids. Of course, I said it a couple videos ago. Play guys like Easton Cowan. This is obviously good NHL experience for them. Of course, obviously it's not the best circumstances because the team is tanking and they're losing right now, but just give these kids the runway to play and get experience, of course, and then we'll see what happens next year because this team here, obviously, like I've said and I will continue to say, there needs to be some serious overhaul changes at the end of the season. Of course, we have seen it many times, guys, this season where this Maple Leafs team just completely baffles you and how they play hockey, of course. And the Habs didn't even have Cole Caulfield for most of the third period. He clearly hurt himself, did something, came on for the power play, but then sat right back down, went to the dressing room. So thank God I didn't see that kid on the score sheet tonight. But it honestly doesn't matter, guys. Maple Leafs continue to lose games. 8 games out of the post-Olympic break they've lost in a row. It's genuinely incredible to me to see how badly this hockey team has come up the post-Olympic break. Obviously, guys like Berube and Treliving will have to answer that at the end of the season, of course. Certain guys will have to answer it at the end of the season. Obviously, the leaders of the team, of course. Ironically enough, that Berube said a couple games ago he leans on his leaders. Well, I ain't seeing them really step up that much as of late, if you ask me, other than Willie getting the goal tonight. Maybe McCabe sticking up for Easton Cowan. But other than that, though, guys, when you look at the leaders of this team, we have seen it in the past. We see it this year, of course. The leaders just don't stand up, take responsibility. Of course, they could say anything they want. They got to do it on the ice. We have just not seen it enough this year. Of course, we obviously know this team is not good enough. But man, oh man, it has been a really tough stretch for this hockey team. It's just been a really difficult year for us Leaf fans, to say the least, guys, but hopefully they continue to lose, hopefully they lose on Wednesday or Thursday, I think, sorry. Hopefully they lose on Thursday against the Ducks, playing Buffalo on Saturday, continue to pour on those L's, and then we'll see how the other teams do. Hopefully they continue to get W's and just changes the Leafs position. The tank is on right now, guys. Tank Nation's in full effect for the Toronto Maple Leafs till the end of the season. It's really unfortunate, something we haven't been used to for the last 9 to 10 years, but seeing how they played in the first period tonight against Montreal, seeing how they couldn't generate anything in the second till the end of the game, then when they pulled the goalie, you just know that this team here, guys, this season is curtained. This team is not good enough, and it's honestly amazing to me. You're seeing guys like Scott Laughton, 2 goals in 2 games for the LA Kings, but the Leafs here can't utilize him properly enough, for him to be effective for them. Just goes to show what a disaster this season has been, guys, for the Maple Leafs, and everything from top to bottom, from management to the coach to the players itself. This game here was just another example, to say the least. And, looking at the Habs, they were rebuilding when we were in so-called contention. Now the Habs are going in the right direction. Hopefully this is just a down year for us, but I think we got to be pretty naive to think maybe this hockey team here can switch it around and be a cup contender in 1 year. But we have to hope to God this hockey team can retool properly, trade the proper players that are not good enough for this team, and we'll see what happens next year, guys. But we still got a long way to go before this season ends, guys. The grind continues until the end of the regular season. It's going to continue to get more and more painful as the season goes on, of course. But at the end of the day, this may suck, but it's what's best for this hockey team, guys. But we'll love to your thoughts and opinions on another horrendous hockey team by the Toronto Maple Leafs, guys. Like this video, subscribe if you guys want to see more content. Go Leafs, go as always, guys. See you guys on the next episode of Leafs Unfiltered. Ciao, guys.